Hi, and welcome to this mini introductory presentation, Healing After Birth, a program that helps mothers feel better about their childbirth experiences. This is Jennifer Sommerfeld, and I will be your guide throughout this webinar. So to begin, I invite you to consider the following questions. Did your birth unfold differently than you had planned? Did you feel confused, powerless, or overwhelmed by the experience? Did you feel abandoned during labor or terrified by the event? Are you or did you struggle to connect with your newborn in the postpartum? Are you flooded with uncomfortable memories of your birth experience? Do you avoid talking about your childbirth? Did you experience violating procedures during labor and birth? Do you get the sense that something was robbed or was lost throughout the process? If you answered yes to any one of these questions, I encourage you to listen to the remainder of this webinar, as my hope is for you that you will eventually feel better about your birth experience. You thought you were prepared and that your body would know how to give birth, but what unfolded was not what you had expected, and it took you by surprise. This is a common statement that I have heard from many mothers who were negatively impacted by their childbirth experience. They thought that they had read all the right books, and that they had asked all the right questions, and that they took all the right classes. And this mindset resulted in them feeling confused about what had happened, resulting in them asking the question, why didn't my birth turn out the way I had imagined and hoped it would? And eventually believing that somehow their body failed them and that it was their fault. I have yet to meet a mother who does not, to some degree, believe that it was her fault. Current research indicates that 25% of births are recorded as having been traumatic. This means that 1 out of 3 women will have a traumatic birthing experience. And taking into consideration that this research does not represent the entire population of childbearing women, nor does it reflect every woman's experience. Many women are likely left in silence or have considered their birth to be, quote, normal, when in fact, what they experienced was traumatic. And this leads us to our next slide, which will take a look at some of the researched factors that contribute to a birth being experienced as traumatic. So, a loss of control and power throughout the labor, overwhelming pain and fear, violation of body, no consent, confusion, loss of voice, and needs not validated, a lack of trust in body and caregiver, and they did not feel safe. There was a fear of death or perceived harm to self or baby. Overt violence and abuse, such as physical, verbal, or emotional, are all factors that can contribute to a birth being experienced as traumatic. Now let's take a look at the definition of trauma. An event is considered traumatic if a person has experienced terror, a threat to self or another, and lacks the power to change or stop the event. Both the experience and the person's perception of the experience has an effect on trauma. And according to leading-edge trauma experts, birth trauma is listed as a potentially traumatic event. What happens when a mother has experienced a traumatic birth? What are some of the signs and symptoms of trauma? These are the 4 major categories of how trauma is expressed. So there are negative changes in thinking and mood patterns. There can be intrusive memories, avoidance behaviors, changes in physical and emotional reactions. As these are just the overarching categories, let's take a look at some examples of how this might show up. So, for example, a mother may be experiencing negative thinking patterns or negative emotions such as anger, frustration, sadness, numbness, or not just quite feeling normal. And these feelings and thoughts don't seem to be resolving themselves. Often mothers will be diagnosed with postpartum depression or mood disorders, when in fact they may be suffering from unresolved birth trauma. Or another example of how this might show up for a mother is that she avoids thinking about her birth or talking about her birth, and she avoids situations and may find mothering groups too stressful, or even avoiding listening to other birth stories. Another example of how this might show up is that the mother feels that she has no control over the memories and feels like she's reliving the experience every day or still in the experience, and that maybe these memories are flooding her during the night and she's not sleeping well or having lots of nightmares. So these are just some examples of how this can show up in your everyday life. Moving on, unresolved trauma compromises the mother's sense of well-being. So current research in neuroscience and attachment theory state that trauma compromises brain function, relationships, especially those closest to us, and the health of the body and one's emotional state. Therefore, healing from trauma is a comprehensive process that aims to resolve stress and pain on a brain, body, and relational level. Of course, many mothers ask the question, will I get better? Or will I get myself back? Or will I get my body back? Or will I get my brain back? There's this sense that something is missing or was lost. And I'm always quick to answer, yes, you can get better. And if I didn't believe in this, I would not be doing the work I am doing. But thankfully, you don't have to believe in me believing in you. We have a lot of information and research now that suggests that in fact this is true. Neuroscience informs us of such and lets us know that the brain is pliable and plastic, and that it can change and is constantly changing as our environmental cues change. And also that the body is intrinsically motivated to restore itself back to a place of calm, resting openness, so that we can engage in thriving relationships with ourselves and with others. And that also it requires more than just talk therapy, but mostly that you are wired to find your way towards wholeness. And because of the research done on intergenerational trauma, we now know that when you heal, you're healing generations forward and generations back. And that we cannot heal alone. You're not meant to heal alone. That we need a community of support. And mostly, I've reminded many mothers, including myself, that patience is a virtue and healing is a journey. And I close with this question. Why do you want to heal from your past birth? Or perhaps the question, what is holding you back from healing? Take a moment, get a pen and paper, And just journal about those two questions. And I hope you've enjoyed this mini introductory presentation. And if a spark of curiosity has been ignited, I invite you to explore the different ways to deepen your healing experience. And you can also schedule a complimentary 20-minute inquiry call with me. Just visit my website and click Book an Appointment.